Imagine a tiny island, barely a speck on the map, standing defiantly against one of the most powerful empires the world has ever seen. In the spring of 1565, the Mediterranean became the stage for an epic showdown that would echo through history. On one side, the mighty Ottoman Empire, a colossal force spanning 3 continents, led by the aging but still fearsome Suleiman the Magnificent. On the other, the small island of Malta, defended by a handful of warriors known as the Knights Hospitaller, who had spent years challenging the Ottoman grip on the seas. Suleiman had enough of their defiance. He was determined to crush them once and for all. What unfolded was a siege so desperate, so heroic, that it would decide the fate of an entire region. This is the story of how a few stood against many, of courage against impossible odds, and of a battle that changed the course of history. Let's dive into the incredible tale of the Great Siege of Malta. Suleiman the Magnificent, at the age of 71, was a ruler whose name inspired both awe and fear. His empire was vast, stretching from the Middle East to North Africa and into Europe. But there was one tiny thorn in his side that refused to be plucked: the island of Malta. This small piece of rock, just 27 kilometers long and 14 kilometers wide, was a fortress for the Knights of St. John, a Christian military order who used it as a base to raid Ottoman ships and disrupt their trade routes. For years, these knights had been a constant irritation, striking at the heart of Suleiman's control over the Mediterranean. Malta wasn't just a nuisance, it was a strategic threat. If the Ottomans could take it, the path to Sicily would open wide, and from there, the fractured heart of Christian Europe would be within reach. For Suleiman, this wasn't just a military goal, it was personal. Every ship the knights captured, every raid they launched, was a direct insult to his authority and prestige. He couldn't let it stand. The knights themselves were no strangers to defiance. They had been kicked out of their previous stronghold on the island of Rhodes in the early 1520s by none other than Suleiman himself. After that defeat, Emperor Charles V granted them Malta in 1530, but with a clear condition: they had to protect the sea lanes and act as a shield against Ottoman expansion. They took this role seriously, turning Malta into a fortress and a base for their naval raids. To Suleiman, wiping them out was not just about strategy, it was about restoring his honor. So, he decided to unleash the full might of his empire. He assembled a massive force, the largest amphibious invasion since ancient times. Picture this: 130 war galleys slicing through the waves, 180 transport ships packed with men and supplies, and between 25,000 and 30,000 elite soldiers ready for battle. Add to that countless camp followers, engineers, and artillery experts, and you had an army that seemed unstoppable. Leading this force were Suleiman's trusted commanders: Mustafa Pasha on land, Admiral Piali Pasha at sea, and the legendary corsair Dragut, a name that struck fear into the hearts of sailors across the Mediterranean. Against this overwhelming power stood Grandmaster Jean de Valette, a battle-hardened warrior in his late 60s. He knew the odds were against him, but he wasn't about to give up without a fight. Under his command were just 500 knights, the core of his elite fighting force. Alongside them were about 4,500 European mercenaries, mostly from Spain and Italy, and around 3,000 Maltese militia, ordinary farmers and townsfolk with little to no military training. In total, they numbered fewer than 9,000, facing an enemy force at least 3 times their size. Their supplies were limited too. They had enough gunpowder to last maybe 6 weeks if they rationed it carefully. The odds were roughly 10 to 1, and to be honest, the Ottomans probably had better rations. On paper, it looked like a hopeless cause, but sometimes history isn't written on paper. It's written in blood, sweat, and sheer determination. On the 18th of May, 1565, the Ottoman fleet arrived, their scouts slipping silently into Marsaxlok Bay under the cover of dawn. Mustafa Pasha, the land commander, was brimming with confidence. He expected the knights to surrender within days, maybe even hours. He imagined a quick, easy victory that would add another jewel to the Ottoman crown. Instead, he found something very different. The knights had been preparing. Their star-shaped forts, newly strengthened, stood ready with cannons pointed at the sea. The defenders showed no sign of giving up. This was not the welcome Mustafa had expected. To stick to his tight schedule, he knew he needed to capture the deep-water anchorage in Grand Harbor, and that meant taking Fort St. Elmo, a small outpost at the tip of the Siberis Peninsula. It looked like an easy target, a minor annoyance. But Grandmaster de Valette saw it differently. He knew St. Elmo was expendable. Every day the Ottomans spent attacking it was time bought for the main defenses at Burgu and Senglia. It was a cold, hard decision, but a necessary one. For nearly 30 grueling days, the Ottomans bombarded Fort St. Elmo without mercy. They fired cannonballs weighing over 36 kilograms, smashing stone walls into rubble and turning the ground into a cratered mess. Inside the fort, the knights fought back with desperate creativity. At night, they launched daring raids, rolling burning hoops of tar down the slopes to set Ottoman siege towers on fire, lighting up the darkness with flames of defiance. The casualties piled up on both sides, the air thick with the stench of gunpowder and death. Then, in late June, the Ottomans suffered a terrible loss. Dragut, the 80-year-old corsair legend and brilliant strategist, was struck by a shard of stone during a scouting mission. He died around the 23rd of June, and his death hit the Ottoman forces hard, shaking their morale. Yet, despite this setback, Fort St. Elmo finally fell on the same day. The Ottomans had won a pile of ruins, a patch of broken rock, no bigger than 4 football fields, but at a staggering cost. Between 2000 and 4,000 of their men lay dead, all for a small piece of ground that had given the defenders precious time. Mustafa Pasha was furious. The resistance had been far stronger than he expected, and the losses were unacceptable. In a brutal act of rage, he ordered the bodies of the fallen knights to be beheaded and floated across the harbor on wooden planks as a grim warning. Grandmaster de Valette's response was just as ruthless. He ordered the heads of Ottoman prisoners to be fired back from the walls of Burgu using cannons. The siege had turned personal. It was no longer just about land or strategy. It was a bitter feud, a clash of wills with no room for mercy. As July arrived, the Mediterranean sun burned hotter, and so did the desperation within the walls of Burgu and Senglia. Food and water were running dangerously low, and hope was even scarcer. The Ottomans, having learned from their costly victory at St. Elmo, attacked with renewed fury. Their skilled miners dug tunnels beneath the fortifications, hoping to collapse the defenses from below. But the Maltese fought back with equal cunning. Women, children, and the elderly joined the effort, carrying clay pots filled with olive oil to the trenches. When the Ottoman soldiers advanced, the oil was poured in and set alight, turning the ditches into blazing rivers of fire. It was a terrifying sight that drove back many attackers. Night after night, under skies glowing with the fires of war, both sides buried their dead. The only sounds were the moans of the wounded and the distant shouts of the enemy. On the 15th of August, a holy day known as the Feast of the Assumption, Mustafa launched a massive assault, striking both Burgu and Senglia at the same time. Dozens of scaling ladders reached the walls, and for 3 brutal hours, the battle was a chaotic mess of hand-to-hand combat. Grandmaster de Valette, now 70 years old, fought at the forefront in full armor, a sword in one hand and a crucifix in the other. A knight who saw him later wrote that the Grandmaster seemed like a figure of divine wrath, his presence inspiring the exhausted defenders to keep fighting. Against all odds, the Ottomans were pushed back. leaving another 3,000 dead outside the walls. But the siege was wearing everyone down. The Ottoman camp, sprawling across every valley, became a breeding ground for disease. Dysentery and heatstroke killed as many as the cannons did. Inside the walls, the defenders were at their breaking point, down to their last barrels of water and splitting their last loaves of bread 9 ways. Whispers of surrender grew louder. Meanwhile, in Sicily, the Spanish viceroy, Don Garcia de Toledo, received grim reports of Malta's plight. Many believed the island was lost, but against all advice, he gathered a relief force of 8,000 men on 35 galleys. Then, he waited for the right wind, for any sign that might give them a chance. On the 7th of September, a small fleet slipped into Melilla Bay at dawn. It was the relief force, known as the Gran Soccorso, carrying not just 8,000 men, but also the red and yellow flag of Spain. Ottoman scouts saw the banner and panicked. Was this the start of a massive Christian counterattack? Mustafa Pasha, already low on supplies with just 10 days' worth left, made a desperate decision. He ordered one final, all-out assault, hoping to crush the defenders before what he feared was the full might of Europe arrived. But his men were broken. The attack failed within an hour. Even his elite janissaries, the feared shock troops of the empire, refused to climb the ladders again. They had seen too much death. On the 11th of September, the unimaginable happened. The Ottomans, defeated and demoralized, burned their tents, destroyed their remaining cannons so they couldn't be used, and sailed away. Europe, which had held its breath for 4 agonizing months, let out a sigh of relief and disbelief. The cost was staggering. The Ottomans lost at least 10,000 men, maybe more. The Maltese losses were heartbreaking too, with a third of the island's population gone and 250 knights fallen. But the impact of this victory went far beyond the numbers. For the first time since the fall of Constantinople in 1453, the seemingly unstoppable Ottoman Empire had been halted, not by a massive army, but by a tiny island, a few determined warriors, and an unyielding refusal to give up. It shattered the myth of Ottoman invincibility and changed the balance of power in the Mediterranean. Grandmaster de Valette, with his sharp wit, later said, "Nothing is better known than the Siege of Malta." He wasn't wrong. The victory captured the imagination of Europe. Stories of the siege spread quickly, printed in cities like Antwerp. Poets wrote epic verses comparing de Valette to the ancient Spartan hero Leonidas. The Knights Hospitaller, newly celebrated, rebuilt their capital and named it Valletta in honor of their leader. Today, it stands as a magnificent, planned city, the first of its kind in Europe north of the Alps, a lasting symbol of their triumph. More importantly, the Ottoman threat to Italy and Western Europe never returned with the same force. After this defeat, the empire shifted its focus eastward to Persia, southward to North Africa, and got bogged down in endless wars in Hungary. The loss at Malta forced them to rethink their ambitions. For Malta, the victory became a cornerstone of its identity. Every village on the island still honors its local heroes from the siege, and every child learns the story of the price paid for freedom, etched into the very limestone of their home. Before 1565, the Knights had been nearly bankrupt, but after the siege, donations poured in from across Christian Europe, from Madrid to Krakow, amounting to hundreds of thousands of dollars in today's value. Their navy, revitalized, continued to challenge Ottoman and Barbary pirate ships for another 2 centuries. As for Suleiman the Magnificent, the defeat stung deeply. He died the following year on a muddy battlefield in Hungary, reportedly muttering, "Malta, Malta," with his last breath, a sign of how much the loss haunted him. So, the next time you think sheer numbers or raw power always win, remember this story: 500 knights, 3,000 brave farmers, and a 70-year-old commander who refused to surrender the keys to Europe didn't just win a battle. They turned a tiny island into a shield for a continent. They showed that sometimes, a mix of grit, clever strategy, and unshakable belief can stop even the mightiest force history can muster. Battles like Malta in 1565 are rare. They're not decided by overwhelming armies or endless resources, but by pure willpower wrapped in armor and fueled by faith. If that doesn't inspire you to look closer at history's forgotten moments, I don't know what will. While you're thinking about it, hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe. Because when the future looks bleak, we all need a reminder that even the smallest stand can keep the door to hope wide open.